Successful communication among people from different cultures is not always easy. What can be perceived as the norm for certain people might not be well received by others. Once a Chinese student asked me why Brazilians love to party and why Canadians are so serious. A Canadian student once asked me why Chinese people only hang out with other Chinese. These are certainly stereotypes, and if we don't discuss them, it can result in serious misunderstandings. The focus of this presentation is to provide a way for English language teachers to integrate the cultural dimension in the English language classroom. My name is Angelica Galante. I'm a PhD candidate at the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education at the University of Toronto. This presentation was designed specifically for a Brazilian audience, but it can be applicable to many other countries. I would first like to acknowledge the Faculty of Philosophy, Languages and Humanities at the University of São Paulo for hosting the 5th International Conference on Second Language Pedagogies. I have great memories of Fefeleche, as this faculty is typically referred to, as 20 years ago I was an undergraduate student here in English Literature and Linguistics, so it's very nice to be back here. I would also like to thank the University of Toronto, the Ontario and Canadian governments for financially supporting my doctoral studies, and Dr. Enrica Picardo for her supervision. The content of this presentation has been published at the Brazilian English Language Teaching Journal and is available online. I'll provide the link in the end of this presentation. This presentation includes a brief intro to ELT in Brazil, the theoretical framework used to develop this project, how technology can enable the development of intercultural communicative competence, and a description of 3 projects that I have previously piloted with a high degree of success. If we ask Brazilians which language they would like to learn, the answer is usually English. Without a doubt, English is the most popular foreign language for Brazilians because of its status in the country and around the world. This is typical in other non-English speaking countries as well. For many years, ELT focused on teaching the language only, and culture was typically neglected. However, recently, the field began to pay more attention to social-cultural factors, including linguistic diversity, especially because most English speakers around the world are not native speakers of English. So it's important to learn different varieties of English, different views, and different ways of thinking. Linguistic diversity is not exclusive to English only. If we think of Brazil, the official language is Portuguese, which is somewhat different from the variety spoken in Portugal. Besides Portuguese, Brazil has over 250 languages, including indigenous and immigrant languages. Because all these languages are linked to their cultures, the importance to value this diversity is encouraged nowadays. In the 1960s, Noam Chomsky highly influenced the field of linguistics with the concept of communicative competence, that focused on grammar, phonology, morphology, etc., and was mainly based on a native speaker model. Later, Del Hymes was influenced by anthropology and redefined the concept of competence. He argued that social factors were also important for communication. That is, it's important to know how to use a language appropriately in different social contexts. Since then, the concept of communicative competence has gained attention and has been reconceptualized over the years, moving away from the native speaker model. For example, Marianne Celce-Murcia has warned English teachers that language instruction must be integrated with cultural and cross-cultural instruction. That means that besides knowledge of linguistic cultural appropriateness, being sensitive to people's beliefs when using language is necessary for effective communication. Nowadays, English teachers need to recognize that language and culture go hand in hand. Yet, because many teacher education programs in Brazil and other countries do not typically prepare teachers to address the cultural dimension in the classroom, these discussions, although necessary, are often neglected. Intercultural communicative competence has been endorsed by many educational organizations around the world. Discussions about culture in the English classroom do not only include references to the native speaker, and we all know that English textbooks typically include content that is either American or British. Some people even look for schools based on the American or British tradition. However, it's important to note that English is an international language and there are many varieties of English in other English-speaking countries, like South Africa and India, for example, and non-English-speaking countries, for example, Brazil. Also, considering English is mostly spoken by non-native speakers in the world, exploring cultures that are not related to the English language is another goal of intercultural communicative competence. One main goal of interculturality is to help language learners interact with speakers of other languages on equal terms and to be aware of their own identities. In essence, when language learners develop intercultural awareness, they can convey information more effectively. These include communication with both native and non-native speakers of English. For example, a Brazilian may use English to communicate with a Chinese, or a person from India uses English to communicate with an Australian, both native speakers of English. In this sense, regardless if they are native or non-native speakers of English, understanding people's cultural orientations is important for successful communication. One of the most influential models of ICC is Michael Byram's, which serves as a guide for language teachers to integrate interculturality in the classroom. This model, which includes 5 subsets of knowledges, values important dimensions in relation to culture. For example, cultural relativism, critical awareness, empathy, curiosity, and identity. In Brazil, given the popularity of the use of English as a lingua franca, English learners need to develop an understanding of speakers of English from many different countries. For example, being late for an appointment might be considered disrespectful in many cultures, while for others it's pretty normal. So how can we make use of technology to encourage these discussions? Language learning classrooms, including English classrooms in Brazil, are a perfect place to explore ICC. One way to promote intercultural dialogues is through digital literacies, more specifically video projects. One main advantage of using digital projects is that they cross geographical barriers. That is, students can watch videos from others all over the world without having to travel. They have very easy access and are mostly free. YouTube, VoiceThread, and Edmodo are just a few platforms that I have used myself, but there are other options available. So what would these videos involve? To simply put, there are 3 steps that can be done. Step 1, students watch videos already available online. These can be found on those platforms, but I will also provide a website where they can be found. Step 2, teachers encourage them to complete a reflection, which can be done orally or written, in class or as homework. Step 3, students themselves record a video about their reflection and add their personal perspective on a given issue. Through my experience in Brazil and in Canada, English learners often talk about difficulties in communicating with people because of different cultures. Sometimes they say that they have difficulty understanding others because of their accent, values, and different ways of thinking. So I decided to develop 3 different projects to address these issues. In my multicultural identity, students are asked to reflect on their own history and think of all cultural backgrounds that might have shaped their identity. Heritage, culture of the parents, the family, the country, city, neighborhood where they were born, cultures practiced at home, school, work, cultures learned when traveling to other cities, regions, or countries, and the media, including music, TV, movies, art, etc. The aim is to encourage students to reflect on the many cultural orientations that have shaped their identity. The provocative title of the second project, My Accent is Funny, is aimed at motivating students to reflect on power relations associated to socially constructed notions of prestige related to accents. Students are invited to recall situations in which discrimination happened because of accents. They may be required to think of accents used in their first language, for example, Portuguese spoken in the Northeast and Portuguese spoken in the Southeast of the country, and then English variations that are given more or less prestige. This discussion will probably spark stereotypical views, but a reflection should include a critical evaluation of the imbalance of power. In Why Don't You Think the Way I Do?, students are invited to think of misunderstandings they have had when communicating with people from other cultures, why such misunderstandings happened, and invite them for a reflection. For example, differences in opinions related to what constitutes a family, for example, single-parent or same-sex families, and views of social issues, for example, homelessness and security. It is important to bear in mind that these differences may not be limited to one country in particular, as they could happen in different locations even in the same city. In conclusion, this presentation briefly introduced how the notion of communicative competence in ELT has evolved to recognize the importance of the integration of language and culture. In particular, the integration of ICC in ELT as beneficial for students as it prepares them to communicate in English with people from other cultures, to understand, respect, and value others' cultural identities as well as their own. Through Byram's ICC model, students are given the opportunity to use English while reflecting on the various cultures related to the English language, as well as the ones that make up the Brazilian cultural landscape, which include immigrant and indigenous languages and varieties of the official language in the country. Most importantly, discussions that go beyond stereotypical views of cultures and cultures of native speakers of English are essential for preparing Brazilian English speakers for successful communication in the increasingly global community. I hope this presentation has sparked your interest in developing ICC projects with your own students. For a sample of videos, you may want to visit a website I developed to showcase projects of students around the world, www.breakingtheinvisiblewall.com. You can also tell your students that if they are interested, they can have their videos displayed on this website. As I have previously mentioned, this presentation was based on an article published at the Brazilian English Language Teaching Journal and can be accessed via the link below. Muito obrigada, and if you wish to contact me, you can send me a message via email, through my website, or on Twitter. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.